We're here for a really exciting session with some experts in higher education. We're here with Miranda, Chi-Chi, and Celia, so I'll allow them to introduce themselves, and what we're going to do is just ask them to kind of share a brief kind of history about how they got here, from academic preparation to landing their current jobs, and hopefully they will be able to answer some questions that you might have. So thanks again for coming. I'm going to start, Miranda.
Sure. Hi, I'm Miranda SWANSON. I'm the Deputy Dean of Students in the Division of the Humanities here. I came to the University of Chicago in 2000 to go through the Master of Arts program in the Humanities. I had done my undergraduate work in fine arts, studio art, painting, and sculpture. And after graduating, I was holding different sorts of odd jobs, mainly as an assistant manager in the restaurant industry. One of the great things about doing an undergraduate degree in fine arts was that it was really fun, and by the end of my BFA, I had come to the conclusion that I would not pursue a lucrative career as a struggling artist. So I fell back on what I knew, which was my minor in English literature, and thought, well, I love to read. Maybe a PhD would be the place for me. So I came to math, which is a one-year master's program, thinking, this would be a chance for me to prepare myself for further graduate study. Math was wonderful for me. It allowed me to answer, I think, two really fundamental questions. The first of which was, can I do graduate work at this level? Once I was able to answer that affirmatively, it opened me up to the more important question for me, which was, do I want to do doctoral work? And when I look back on my last quarters in math, it is pretty clear to me now that I was already coming to the conclusion because I was starting to take courses like writing as a public intellectual, so that I was already starting to look outside of the academy. I was very lucky to land a job immediately following graduation from math as program coordinator for that same program. And it was a wonderful job, not only because I got to continue working at the university and working with University of Chicago students, particularly ones in that program, but because it exposed me to a variety of kinds of work that one can do in university administration. A job like a program coordinator position requires you to wear a lot of hats. And so it helps you figure out what you do and don't like. So I knew that I liked to work one-on-one with students, which is something I've continued to do. It was pretty clear to me after 3 years that even though I was capable of event planning, that wasn't something that I was going to pursue further, if I could help it. It also helped me see things like that I enjoyed process management, finding efficiencies in systems, and so I was able to really move forward in those kinds of areas, the kind of work that I enjoyed, and that I found that I was actually pretty good at. 3 years later, there was some restructuring in the Dean of Students office in the Humanities Division. The then Assistant Dean of Students had become an Associate Dean, focusing more on budget and budget planning. And the Assistant Dean position had opened up. And I was asked to apply for it, and I did, and landed the job, where I started to oversee processes like registration, financial aid, and convocation, things that I had done at the department level, but now was doing on a divisional level for 1,200 students rather than 100 students. The job changed over time, and later was reclassified as an associate dean position a few years later. And then this past summer, we had more restructuring in the Dean of Students office. We had a new Dean of Students, and now I am Deputy Dean of Students and oversee all of the operations and have a more direct supervisory role in my current position. So a couple of things that I just want to leave you with from telling my own story that I think are important as you're thinking about careers in this field. One is it's important to reflect and get to know yourself along the way. Figure out what you do and don't like. That's really important. Make sure that you're meeting other people in your jobs now and as you're moving on in your career. That you're getting to know them by serving on committees, and that you're good to your colleagues, that you're timely, you're polite, you're a team player. Those kinds of things are important because then you're asked to apply for positions. People let you know about positions. People are interested in you. If they know it's not the right position, they'll let you know that. They'll mentor you. It's important along the way that you continue to improve yourself and improve your skills. Professional development is especially in I think in academic administration, in almost any area, getting to know information management, databases, web skills, budgets, project management. All of these things will serve you well no matter what area you go into in student service, whether it's student services or other areas in academic administration. And it's important to do what you can to not only think of yourself and your progression, but how do you make things better in your workplace while you're there? What can you do to make things more efficient? And whether that's something as simple as we have, especially in your entry-level jobs, this form could be structured better. I get a lot of questions. How can we make this work? And I think just a little caveat there is it's important to know the environment that you're in. So when you're implementing change, you want to do it the right way. You don't want to alienate the people around you. So you have to understand the environment that you're in. So that's it for me.
My name is NNAKWE. My full name is CHINONYE NNAKWE, but I ask everyone to call me Chichi for that reason. I'm currently the Director for Graduate Diversity Recruitment, and my role is to basically recruit underrepresented minority students to this university, to our graduate programs and to our professional programs. So it's a big job. I'm lucky to say that there are a series of recruitment and admissions officials that do a lot of this work across our university. And a lot of my work is to partner with them to create strategies for improving or enhancing or actually doing the recruitment activities. So how did I actually get here? My background is in science, so I'm a cancer biologist by training, and I came to the University of Chicago in 2000 to pursue a PhD in pathology, and I graduated in 2009. So I'm pretty recent, and hopefully can offer you some strategies for the work or the job transition as well as getting into higher education. With my path, it was actually not well planned. And so I'm going to say that up front, it's not going to be very clear. I can even go back as far as undergraduate, where I came in without a major. I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And so my cause in life was to make sure I knew what I was going to do, and whatever I was going to do was going to have a wonderful impact on people. It was going to be purposeful. It was going to help others. And so through my undergraduate years, I received a liking for science. So I had a passion for science, a love for science, and I decided to become a faculty member and run my own lab. I was going to be a faculty member. I was going to go to African countries because my heritage is Nigerian, and I was going to save the world. Okay. And so
you're still doing that.
I'm still doing it. True. Not as faculty member. And so how did I actually get that desire to where I am today? Throughout graduate school, I found that I had many opportunities to reflect and find out and think about if I really like what I was doing. You know, life in the lab is great. It's a lot of freedom, but then that means you have a lot of freedom to work, right? So if you're not working, what are you doing? You're at home reading papers. If you're not at home reading papers, You're on the way to the lab, getting ready to set up experiments, learning techniques, working with people in your lab or within your community. You're on email trying to get reagents. All of these things that I liked, but what I didn't like was the unpredictability of science. And I especially didn't like the fact that that unpredictability wouldn't allow me to progress in a way that I wanted to. So when time came, I would say my 4th year, my first professor told me she wasn't going to go up for tenure. She was going to take a lateral position and she was going to close her lab, which meant at the time I had just ended a project 6 months before and I was starting over, which means I had to start all the way over. And so in the middle of my program, I switched labs and I worked for Steve Crone in MGCB, who was my advisor and who I graduated in 2009. And so during that process, I had the opportunity to leave. In fact, my graduate advisor for my program said, well, now you can go, you can do what you like and, you know, pursue policy. Because at the time I had heard about the AAAS policy fellowships. And I was thinking, wow, this is another way to really have an impact on society and do great work. And I told my first mentor that, and she told him, and he was like, well, now you can go do that. And I'm like, are you crazy? Because at that time, I had gone through 4.5 years of blood, sweat, and tears, right? And I was not leaving without my degree. And that decision, I said, I came here to get my PhD. I've had a rough time, but I'm not leaving without it. So moved into Steve's lab, and about a month later, I'm on a new project, and I'm in that space. Nothing's working, right? And it was very difficult, and I was thinking, there's got to be something else. And so at that point in time, I started exploring what I could do, and also worked on my projects. And luckily, I have to say, they started working, and I finished. But at that time, I think about 2008, I started looking for work. So I was always told that you should start looking for your job a year before you think you're going to graduate, because things move very slowly, and when you actually put out a resume, there's time for people to actually see that, then they have to get back to you, then you have to schedule an interview, then they have to make you an offer, there's a lot of time in between. And if you're looking for a government job, you should just add a year because it takes even longer at times, depending on the job. So in 2008, the economic crisis hit. And as I'd gone to CAPS before, I had started learning about what I wanted to do, but I also started doing informational interviews, networking, trying to meet with people who were in fields that I thought were interesting. I wasn't making a commitment to go into the field. I was just gathering information and trying to have an informed decision on what I'd like to do. And so I went on different interviews. I went to a law firm that does patent law. Typically, I met them at a fair here. They were actually on campus, and then I went there and I interviewed with everyone, and then they didn't offer me a job. And I was like, wow, this is crazy, because getting a patent position with a PhD from the U of C, it seems not difficult. But at the time, law firms were laying off tons of lawyers. So I wouldn't say tons, but I would say lawyers were being laid off in droves. This is looking for a job at the heart of the economic crisis, and that's kind of the reality that we're still in. I also met with individuals at a consulting firm. They gave a seminar, a talk about their company, and then they were alums, and I made some connections with them. I also did some informational interviews, and then I applied for a job with the consulting firm. And I made it as far as the telephone interview. And an hour before my telephone interview, they emailed me to say that they are no longer hiring. In fact, when I actually got to that firm a year later, I learned that they stopped hiring across the board because the work had dried up. So this was a real reality check, because I felt that I wanted to move forward, but a lot of the opportunities were drying up before me. And at the same time, I wanted to finish, right? So it was a very turbulent time, and I found that I was on this cycle of jobs that I would like to have. So, maybe one month I was like, okay, I'm gonna do patent law. This is what I wanna do, this is meant for me. And then maybe the next month it was, I'm going to go into policy, I'm going to get a government job. Like, oh, maybe I should do a postdoc. This science thing is kind of interesting. And it just kind of cycles. So I'm telling you this to know that being human means that you're not going to have all the answers, and you just want to have as much information as you can. So by the end of my graduate program, I'd gone through the cycle several times. And I finally touched base with the alum that I had met at the consulting firm presentation. And he said, you know, stay in touch when the phone thing happened. And so I got back in touch with him. I said, you know, you guys are hiring again, and I was thinking about applying. He's like, oh, sure, go ahead. Give me your application. I'll give you a referral. The referral is the key to getting fast track into a job. That's why networking is so important. And it's very important to do it early, because you never know when someone's going to have a job come across their desk that they can send to you. And you need to have the time for that job to come, because you don't know when it's going to. So the sooner you can start networking with alumni or people that you just meet off the street, the better, because that actually worked in my favor. And so about 6 months after I graduated, I published my paper. I was starting to look for government positions, and I was also looking for postdocs. Not as actively. I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to look for a postdoc, but I'm really going to look for governmental positions. And I also applied for the consulting position because I wanted a job and I wanted out. I was ready to go. And I actually got an interview, a phone interview, and then they finally brought me in and they hired me. And so I had to tell my advisor, I said, you know, Steve, I got to talk to you about my future, right? Because he didn't know all this time I was doing this job search. And I said, I got a job. And he was like, what? And I said, yeah, I got a job and I'm gonna go work for a consulting firm. He's like, okay, you know. And it was actually one of the hardest things I had to do. I didn't know what he was going to think. I wasn't sure if he was gonna disown me. You know, we had a really good relationship. He was a good mentor to me, and I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm gonna have to tell him, right? That's to say, you know, Debbie said something that was really important for you to remember, right? 50% are not going to have a faculty position. However, in PhD programs, we're often brainwashed to feel like that is the only job. That's the golden job, right? So any other job is a subordinate job, right? Which is not true. And you really have to work hard to wash yourself out of that, because it's all around you. It's all around you and what the faculty say, or some faculty say, and what students say. And so that's something that I often had to struggle with, but I also had to realize that I need to be happy in my life, and that's first and foremost. And so if this is something that you want to try, you just want to try something different, then go ahead. You know, just make sure that you're connecting and staying connected with people in the areas that you think you may want to go into in the future, because you never know when you'll come back. That said, I went into consulting and I worked for, first I started in managed markets, where I helped companies price their products that were going to come to market 2 years in advance. And then I worked in marketing, where we helped companies prepare to launch products that they would bring to market in 2 years. And throughout the time, I learned a great many professional skills, how to interact with individuals in a corporate environment, how to correspond via email. There's a whole email etiquette process that, you know, being a scientist in academia, you're not trained in any of that. A whole series of Excel and PowerPoint techniques that I learned to help present myself and present my ideas. And so those things I really capitalize on. I also had management training class, learn how to work with other people and communicate directly to people so that they understand what you want them to do, because they are a subordinate or someone that's working for you, but the relationship between you and that person is actually very important. And so there were courses that they offered that I was able to take. And then I decided I was not fulfilled, and I was doing the countdown to leave. Because in the end, when I thought back to what I did, and I was in graduate school, I was a mentor to undergraduate students. I mentored students over the summer when they had to have their research projects. I worked in organizations where we would go to elementary schools and teach students about science. I just really liked working with students. I liked educating students about science, and I liked sharing what I had a passion for with other people. And I wasn't doing that in this job. And so when I left consulting, it was February of this year, and I was like, wow, I have no job in a very bad economic climate. So the first thing that I did was to try to gain clarity on really what I wanted to do. Because when I went into consulting, it was so that I could have a different experience. I'd gone straight from undergrad to grad, and I didn't have any work experience in between. And I was thinking, I'm in my 30s and I've never had an actual job other than this one. And so I went into consulting saying, I'm just gonna try to do something different. Coming out of consulting, I felt like I need to make sure that what I'm doing next is really helps me be true to myself and is fulfilling. And so I started looking for teaching positions. I started looking for faculty positions and looking for postdocs, because I figured, well, I know that I like mentoring and teaching and educating, and so I want to go back into an academic environment. Making that transition from a corporate environment to academia is very difficult. First, because people don't like to see that you left academia. Second, because you may have lost connections that you had when you were in academia. So if you're a scientist and you're thinking of doing something other than a postdoc, but you don't know yet what it is and you don't have a job lined up, do a postdoc. Mostly because your flexibility will be greater because you've had that experience, and you don't have to do the postdoc for a long time, but it gives you the space to continue to explore what your interests are, and it also gives you the credibility to teach if you want to teach at an institution that's either a state school, teaching institution, non-teaching institution. There's so many different levels within academia. I can also teach. Right now, I have a PhD if I want to, and the degree helps me have that. The postdoc just helps you have the flexibility, so I definitely would advise that. How am I doing?
Couple more minutes.
Couple more minutes? Okay, I'm wrapping it up. So in the midst of the job search, I looked for different positions, and I had 3 to choose from. I applied to be a health professions advisor. I actually was coming back to UC because I never really left or stopped talking to Steve. I kept really good connections with my former lab, my lab mates, and my mentor. And I told him, okay, I'm ready to kind of go into teaching. What do you think I should do? He's like, you should talk to people. You should see what you can do to get back in the research lab so you can make that transition. And coming back to campus and rebuilding or refreshing my connections, I also came across my current boss, right? So at a revisit weekend event that was a pilot, students who are underrepresented minorities came back to campus after being admitted to graduate school, and they came to kind of take a second look at the physical sciences and biological sciences division. And I happened to see, where's Shayna? Shayna on the street. And she said, yeah, you know, there's this event, you should come check it out. And so I came, and there was an alumni panel. I was able to give great feedback. But then I was also able to see Bill McDade there, and I had already known him because he recruited me to come to UC. And I told him, you know, I'm on the job market, I'm looking for postdocs, I'm looking for teaching positions. He's like, well, you know, you should apply for these positions. He told me about the health professions advisor position. He told me about the graduate diversity recruiter position. And I had also applied for other postdoc and faculty positions across the country. So when I came in for the interviews, I found that the position that I'm in right now was a great fit for my personality, mostly because I like talking to people, I like interacting with people. You know, I can talk to you if I've never met you before. And recruitment is really being a face for an institution. and really welcoming people and helping them feel like they would have a place here. And so that's something that was really easy for me. Another thing was that I had a passion for recruiting underrepresented minorities to the sciences. And so I'd be able to do that, but I'd also be able to recruit students to the humanities, to social sciences, to SSA. You know, I'd really have a very strong impact. And my desire to impact policies would also be realized in this position because I can help partner across the university to create strategies on a really major policy aspect within our institution. So I'll end there, but if you have questions or you want to talk to me later, feel free to come up and talk.
Hi everyone, I'm CELIA BERGMAN. I'm the Dean of Students at SSA. And for those of you who might not know what SSA is, it's the School of Social Service Administration. It's one of the professional schools here at the University of Chicago. So before I tell you my story, I just wanted to do a quick hands up little exercise. For those of you who are currently working in some capacity as a student worker perhaps within an administrative unit here at the University of Chicago. You're working in some sort of capacity. Okay. All right, so a few of you are already starting to make some inroads. Also, hands up for those of you who have identified someone who you would consider as a mentor for you as you consider a career in higher ed administration. Do you have a mentor of sorts? Okay, good. Well, those are two things that I would encourage those of you who are obviously seriously thinking about higher ed admin to pursue is looking for on-campus opportunities to work within administrative offices. There are student positions available across the university. You don't have to be strictly in your academic discipline. So that might be something to look into, and then also certainly creating a relationship with someone who can really serve as your guide and mentor as you're thinking about higher ed admin and pursuing that as a career path. Okay? So for starters, a little bit about my background. I did an undergraduate degree in communications, and at first I wanted to be an anchor woman. That was my goal. And then I discovered that I didn't necessarily have the right temperament for that. You have to be very aggressive and be willing to work, at all hours of the day and night. And you also have to be willing to do a lot of grunt work. Well, now that I think about it, that's kind of what I do now. But anyway, but back in my undergrad days, I decided, well, maybe I don't have the right temperament to be an anchor woman. So then I decided to go the interpersonal communications track within the communications major, where I went to undergrad, which was Wheaton College out in the suburbs. Communications is very broad. So I ended up going the interpersonal route, thinking that I enjoy interacting with people, serving in an advising or in a counseling sort of a capacity. So that's what I ended up doing. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I ended up working in nonprofit for a few years as an administrative assistant because I didn't know what else to do with my communications major. But working as an administrative assistant, I realized that I really have very good organizational skills. I enjoy administration, but I also really just enjoy talking with people and getting to know people. In this particular nonprofit where I was working predominantly with the Romanian population. And I loved working with people from other countries. And I discovered, oh, this is really interesting. We need to file this away. So I sort of reached the ceiling there at that particular nonprofit. So then I decided, well, I need to start to think about next steps. I ended up taking a job working in annual giving, which is the fundraising office at my undergrad institution, thinking, okay, maybe I should give higher ed a try. I like working with people, I like administration. So I ended up doing fundraising at my alma mater for a couple of years. Actually, development work is an aspect of higher ed administration, which is certainly a very feasible career path. I mean, institutions desperately need good fundraisers. So if you enjoy talking to people and just relationship building, that's a huge part of fundraising. So I did that for a couple years, and I quickly discovered that I love working with students because students were actually making the calls to the alumni to ask for money, and I was managing the students. And I realized, okay, I really like working with students, but I don't necessarily want to become a professor. I come from a long history of professors, and I wanted to be different. So I then talked to the dean of students at my undergrad institution about, well, how did you get to where you are? He's the one who actually recommended that I think about graduate education, specifically in higher ed administration. So I am a product of graduate education very focused on higher ed admin. My colleagues here have obviously entered the profession through other disciplines, but I was very much focused on higher ed. So I ended up going to Loyola University right here and pursuing a master's degree in what called, at that time, college student personnel. This was in the early 90s. College student personnel sort of translates to higher ed admin. In my graduate master's program, I had to choose 2 different areas within higher education administration to do an internship. So I chose career services and did an internship in career services, and then I chose international student affairs, thinking, I really enjoyed working with the Romanian population. Maybe this is an area that would be a good fit for me. I loved working with international students. Oh my gosh, it was the perfect fit for me. And so when I finished my master's degree, I knew that's the area of higher ed admin that I really wanted to go into, and I did. And I actually worked in higher ed and international student affairs for 13 years. At a variety of institutions. So I started in Urbana-Champaign, then moved up to UIC here, went to my graduate alma mater in Loyola, worked in the international office there, also at IIT, just up the road, gradually assuming higher level positions as I was making these institutional changes. So I worked in international student affairs for about 13 years. During that time, I decided to begin my PhD in higher ed admin, also at Loyola. So I was working full-time as well as pursuing a PhD. And it's a lot to do. Some of you may be doing that right now. It's a lot to juggle. You definitely have to be able to be a good time manager and be able to carve out time during your day when you are a student and then when you're a working professional. It was a real challenge. But I actually did finish the PhD in higher ed admin within 6 years, working full-time the whole time. So I had kind of reached the top of my game, so to speak, in international student advising, and I had really become an expert and was presenting at conferences all over the country about international student advising, and a lot of that is immigration regulation driven, and had just felt like, okay, I really know this area of higher ed admin very well. It's time to broaden out and sort of spread my wings. So I started looking for positions where I could be more of a generalist within higher ed admin. And I actually identified the position here at the University of Chicago in the Central Dean of Students office, so not where I'm working now. But in the Central Dean of Students office, there was a position open for an Associate Dean of Students in the university, working on a variety of issues, including health affairs and communication. So I ended up taking that position and working in that capacity for 6 years. So I was doing a variety of things in that position. Very different from international student advising, but applying my administrative skills, organizational skills, data skills, and also the interpersonal skills. And then I decided, well, okay, now I know this area pretty well. I did that for 6 years. Really my ultimate goal was to move into a position as a Dean of Students. And actually SSA was one of my first choices. When I was thinking about what would be a good next step for me, it was SSA. My dissertation was about professional education. So SSA was just a great fit for me to be able to move into a professional school, be a Dean of Students, a generalist position, and apply those skills. So I've been there now just since July, so it hasn't been real long. It's been a wonderful change for me, really getting exposure to a broad array of issues, being able to be involved in curricular reform within SSA, as well as academic advising, and then also certainly just the crisis management, personal counseling that a Dean of Students office does. So I really have exposure to academic pieces as well as more of the student life, student services pieces. So Dean of Students office generally gives you sort of that breadth of experience. When I think about some of the skills that I would encourage you to be developing as you're thinking about higher ed admin. Definitely data analysis. We are in a day and age, of course, where you have to justify why you need the funds to do these programs or to have these services. So how do you justify that? You show, you make your case through data. So whether it's doing surveys with your students or looking at course enrollments or how many students attended different programs, you really have to be able to document and make a case for why you need more funds. And that's generally sort of the underlying reason why you're making your case, typically related to funding. So analyzing data, certainly communication skills. Oh my goodness, this is so important, not just with written communication, but the listening skills, the verbal communication. Even taking some just sort of fundamental counseling courses is a really great idea for someone who wants to go into higher ed admin. Management, this was mentioned before by my colleagues. You're going to eventually be managing folks regardless of what you do. So thinking about developing leadership skills and management skills, learning how to supervise others, learning how to critique others, give really meaningful evaluations to your employees. So taking classes that could actually help you develop your management skills is another idea that I would put into your minds. And then budgeting would be another area. Some of you probably already have experience with this, from your own personal budgets to maybe you've worked in organizations where you've had to manage a budget. But certainly this is a very important part of higher ed admin. So being able to use the tools to work on your budget, so Excel or whatever sorts of databases might be utilized for budgeting. I'd certainly encourage you to gain familiarity and facility with that. And then also sort of the fundamental like argumentation and debate kinds of skills. Maybe in philosophy you would get this sort of exposure, but really being able to defend a position, which I know we're all being exposed to with our coursework and thinking critically, but really being able to make a sound case and convince an audience of why you need what you need. So those are very important skills to develop. Other ways that you could sort of bolster your resumes and your CVs right now while you're in the midst of your graduate education. Volunteering, if you don't have a paid position within an office already here at the university, volunteer for committees. I think that was mentioned before. Volunteer for orientations that are happening across campus. Volunteer to be a part of student government or to be instrumental in creating workshops or programs within your academic unit. Just really get yourself out there so that you're actually networking and developing some of these skills for program development. Also attending conferences like today. If there's a particular area of higher ed admin, maybe it's student services or maybe it's more on the academic side, but if there's a particular area that you're thinking that might be interesting for you, go ahead and figure out what are the professional associations pertaining to that particular area. Because those associations generally have either state or regional conferences that aren't quite as expensive. There are a lot of, typically a lot of sessions for newcomers or for graduate students. So again, good networking, ways to learn about the skills needed to enter a particular profession within higher ed admin. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, just identifying someone to be your mentor or someone who can really sort of guide you, ask those tough questions of you, get you to think about perhaps other areas that you're not aware of or haven't considered. Someone who knows your skill set and your personality and can help you really think about what would be a good fit for you. Okay? And certainly any of us up here would be willing to serve that role for you. I think I can speak to that, right? So we would be happy to do that. So that's my spiel.
Great. Well, maybe we could just give everybody a round of applause on the panel. It was a really And I would welcome any of you to ask questions. Hopefully this good information has got you thinking in the direction of higher ed administration careers. Yeah.
Hello. So I just wanted to ask, obviously UChicago is very academically driven, and a lot of the people that we're connected with now are professors or researchers of some kind. So how do we make the kind of connections for good people to write recommendations for us for jobs? How do we select good people to write those recommendations? And what kind of networking can we do here in that regard? Thanks.
So if you're in a program that has you here for a while, there are definitely people that you've worked for either in a paid position or a volunteer position that you have established a good rapport with, and it's able to do things outside of your own program so that you have that repertoire. Ideally what you want is a group of people to choose from, because each position that you apply for is going to have different requirements, and you want someone that speaks to those requirements. And so the more diverse of a selection that you have, the better. But how do you choose them? It definitely depends on the job you're applying to. And I know that any CAPS advisor would say you're not going to write the same resume for every job you apply for. You're going to tailor your application. The same goes for your recommendation letters. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't started, to start volunteering, start working in different areas with advisor's permission, and start thinking of people that you have good rapport with as potential people to write your letters.
I think the only thing I would add to that is if there's an area that is sort of interest to you that maybe you don't know a lot about, go out there and do some informational interviewing here on campus with those of us who work in different administrative offices, just to start to form a relationship, and then maybe that could actually blossom into more of a mentor relationship where someone could actually then serve as a recommender for you. But don't be afraid to, certainly don't be afraid to shoulder tap folks working in areas that you think, this sounds kind of interesting, I'd like to learn more about that. More often than not, you will find that folks love to talk about what they do, and they're so willing to help other people get interested in that particular profession or in that line of work. So don't be hesitant about that.
I might just add one thing to that if I could. Our office is actually kind of formalizing in loose terms, focus groups of graduate students, and these are just very informal kind of lunches a couple of times a quarter, and we just want to hear feedback from you, very honest and candid feedback about a variety of topics that motivate you to talk about. So what we do is we just take names of students who are interested in serving on these kind of groups, and then we categorize our discussions by topic. So we actually have a student committee that grew out of one of those groups that helped plan today. This was a student group who was particularly interested in professional development kinds of initiatives. We've also had focus groups where we just talk over lunch for an hour about what social activities graduate students might be interested in, or academic support services that you might need. So if you're motivated in one of these categories, please feel free to contact my office in a cold call kind of way. We'd love to get the conversation started. In fact, I just received two fabulously enthusiastic emails yesterday from a couple of students who happen to have the same great idea for offering supportive services to you, fellow graduate students, and those two met today at this conference, and they're actually downstairs working away furiously on a great project that we can hopefully help facilitate. So the nice part about our office is it's so general, graduate student affairs. We can really hopefully help facilitate a variety of projects, or at least send you in the right direction, if not through our office, then to some of our colleagues.
Hi. So it sounds to me like a lot of the skills that you mentioned, CELIA, like development, communications, programming, those are skills that are very valuable in the nonprofit sector too. I did a fellowship and I worked in the nonprofit sector before coming here. And I wanted to ask you, what are the differences, if any, between working in nonprofit organizations and higher ed? Is there anything that facilitates that transition if you wanted to work again in administrative skills?
You know, I think The skill sets, there's so much overlap, for sure. I would venture to say that the salaries are a little bit better in higher ed, if that's important to you. But also, higher ed generally would be more bureaucratic, quite honestly. There's typically more layers that you have to get through to do project, take initiative. Now that's not true across the board, but I think in general in higher ed there's a little bit more than you would find in a nonprofit. Higher ed, they're very complex organizations. Higher ed is very complex, and it's, as you probably, different sort of cultures within one big institution. So navigating between offices and learning about how SSD does it as opposed to humanities, as opposed to Pritzker or whatever. That can be a challenge. I'm using University of Chicago obviously as an example. But I would say fundamentally the skill sets are going to be very, very similar. So if you're doing fundraising or writing communications, working on newsletters, whatever, I mean, all of that is so much a part of what we do here. So you're getting really good training if you're working in positions like that. I don't know if anyone has anything to add.
I think I have a shameless plug, if you don't mind. I'm hosting the first annual campus visit day or weekend for underrepresented minority students who have been admitted to our graduate and professional programs, and I'm looking for student volunteers. So if you are interested in volunteering and learning about recruitment activities or our admissions process and things of that nature, you can definitely come and talk to me after the session.
Maybe one more question, I think.
Yeah, I was just wondering, outside of outside of CAPS and just general networking, what are some other sources that we could use to look for jobs? That's all.
In higher education, there's a website called HERC. It's Higher Education Research Consortium, and it's for people. It was originally organized for people who are in academia, and they may have had a partner who they also want to travel with them to a certain region. So there's different regional research consortiums, and so HERC is the Illinois Regional Consortium. Is HERC. And so you could Google that, and you would find a number of different academic positions at the faculty level, at the higher ed administration level, at different levels, and that's a good resource.
There's another website, it's just simply higheredjobs.com. And that website, you can search by geographic location, by institution, by type of job. I know a lot of schools here in the Chicagoland area post jobs to that particular website. And then certainly just going to individual institutions, HR portals or whatever, and then going to the job search engines for individual schools.
The Chronicle of Higher Education also posts these, and I'm sure CAPS has a listing on their website. They likely have a publication on jobs in higher ed and how to find them. And it looks like there's a LinkedIn session after this,
Yeah, LinkedIn.
which could be interesting
gosh.
because I think it's started in certain science professions and in the tech world. My brother works for PayPal, and early on, they were using LinkedIn to network and meet one another, and it's really spread.
I guess for me, I really would like to stress the importance of networking in your job search, because that's often better than just trolling HR sites. If there's someone out there that can put your resume in front of someone who's actually hiring, that personal touch makes the difference between them looking at 500 resumes and this one resume.
And that's
so,
actually where alumni can come into play.
Oh, absolutely.
If you can connect, if you can find a job that you like and then connect a UChicago alumna to any of those positions, even in the same company, you might just have the edge that Chi-Chi's referring to. So you can also get hooked into the alumni network through CAPS. there's a database called CCC, Chicago Career Connections.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the CAPS program here, as far as informational interviews, those are the first sets of networking that you have. And you're at a world-class university, now you have world-class connections, and you have to take advantage of it, really, because that's kind of what it takes to get a position in this job climate.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thanks again to the panelists. And to Celia's point, we will have a survey after this. So if you like this kind of programming and want to see us do it again, we ask that you take the survey. We'll send it to you via email. But enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you at the reception.